For your ears only for the week of August 24th, I'm David Alpern.
I'm Melissa Exelberth with a quote from the news. A situation in which there will no longer be anyone left to help. That's what Russian officials said they were determined to avoid by sending a convoy with humanitarian aid across the Ukraine border to areas controlled by pro-Russian separatists, without Kiev's okay. Also last week, Moscow shut down the city's flagship McDonald's, officially for health reasons, though many saw it as retaliation for U.S. sanctions. If they really cared about people's health, said one Muscovite, they wouldn't have let it open in the first place. Now this.
Today, the entire world is appalled by the brutal murder of Jim Foley by the terrorist group ISIL. The United States of America will continue to do what we must do to protect our people. We will be vigilant and we will be relentless. From governments and peoples across the Middle East, there has to be a common effort to extract this cancer so that it does not spread.
The bloody beheading of journalist John Foley and the threat that a second U.S. citizen's life may be at stake suddenly made other Americans take personally the spread of Islamic State terrorism from Syria to Iraq. And it posed perhaps the biggest challenge yet to Barack Obama if it pushes him back to the battle he campaigned so successfully against to get to the White House. Even short of that, there was controversy over the way Obama responded to the ISIS crisis and domestic controversy over race and fatal police force between rounds of golf while vacationing on Martha's Vineyard.
Washington was also buzzing about the politically charged indictment of Texas Governor Rick Perry for alleged abuse of power just as he was restoring his image for another possible presidential run, and about continuing signs that Republicans might win back the Senate this November. To consider these and other developments of the week for your ears only, we're joined again by veteran TV commentator Eleanor Clift, also a contributor at thedailybeast.com. Welcome back to the program.
Glad to be with you.
Even before the Foley execution, we saw increased U.S. air attacks on Islamic State fighters around Mosul, and now there's talk of expanding them to extremist bases back in Syria, where some of our special operations troops earlier tried to rescue the journalist. How far back to war do you see Obama taking the country?
Well, I think he's drawing the line at nation building and at putting boots on the ground. But I think you've heard the case being made these last few days by the administration that the border between Iraq and Syria is basically non-existent, and that if they're going to continue to hit ISIS, that they may have to go into Syria. What I'll be interested to see if it happens, where the U.S. is in Iraq, partly at the invitation of the Iraqi government. Let's see if Syrian President Assad will invite the U.S. in to mount these airstrikes, because Assad is battling ISIS as well. It just shows how complicated all these geopolitical alliances are. Sometimes, your worst enemy becomes your ally.
And of course, those special operations troops don't fight in flip-flops. They do wear boots. But meanwhile, are the White House, Senate, and House leaders just as happy that Congress is not in session now when the fury over Foley could trigger a too hasty overreaction?
I think Congress is happy to let the president make this decision, but you can see in the polls that have been taken and also just kind of listening to the statements made by various politicians that there seems to be now support for airstrikes because the behavior of ISIS is so brutal.
You talked about ISIS with veteran diplomat John Negroponte, our ambassador in Iraq, when U.S. forces there released Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who later became the ISIS leader. Does Negroponte have any regrets?
He said he did not recall specifically any discussion about releasing Baghdadi after he had been detained in Iraq, but he talked about how the political pressure that he and other American officials got from the various sheiks who would call up and say, well, I know this person, he's not a terrorist, please let him go. And he basically said, we got those pressures and sometimes we gave into them. And he said that he didn't think that we, should beat ourselves up over that sometimes those things happen. But I think his larger regrets came across when he said that the way that U.S. should proceed is to limit our response to counterterrorism and to carefully avoid recreating the situation that existed when President Bush was in the White House, which was a much broader effort of trying to change the government and the society in Iraq.
Policy aside, are you surprised that Obama permitted himself to be pictured going back to golf after periodic statements about Foley and the issues of race violence and injustice in Ferguson, Missouri?
Not at all, because I think it's in keeping with the attitude that he has projected ever since he won re-election, that he's not going to worry about what he sees as sort of petty carping. And, every president has gotten criticism for going on vacation at inopportune moments. And there was, a famous scene of President Bush delivering a very sober message and then literally turning around while the cameras were on him and saying, "See this," as he showed off his tee shot. And I think if you examine the vacation periods of recent presidents, this one has been away from the White House for fewer days than his predecessors. And if you want to get really crass about it, if the extremists are watching and they see him continuing to play golf and continuing to smile, I think they can see that even beheading an American citizen is not going to, bring this country to its knees.
What do you make of the Rick Perry indictment? Mostly political, but maybe backfiring as Perry exploits it to rally support?
The prosecutor that brought the indictment, it's a Democratic area, and so there is some partisan politics. But if you read the Texas papers, they've got a pretty solid case against the governor. This is going to be fought out over a period of months, and if in fact the governor is cleared, then it's a big win for him, and he will have rallied his base. And I suppose even if he's convicted, Republican primary voters may still think he's a hero. But I think it's a problem going forward. You don't like indicted after your name if you're competing for the presidency.
There's also been some interesting comment on the libertarian appeals being made by Kentucky Senator Rand Paul and the minimal response so far by millennials he might hope to attract. How do you see that?
Well, I give Rand Paul credit for he's trying to remake and to modernize the Republican Party. Problem is, when you examine his positions, he's opposed to same-sex marriage. He's kind of a checkered history on civil rights. He doesn't seem to support issues that young people would rally to. So I must say the trip he took to Guatemala, where he joined with other medical personnel and was operating as he's an ophthalmologist, operating as an eye surgeon on people there. That was very good publicity for him, and he brought along a whole team of camera people and political consultants, so you can see him beginning to put together a presidential campaign.
How do you see the victory of so many mainstream Republicans over Tea Party primary candidates affecting the war for Senate control in November?
Well, the Republicans have good candidates this time. They don't have people who can be caricatured as so far out there that they can't possibly win. So it's going to be a very hard-fought campaign for the Senate. The Republicans, when you look at the states, I think 6 of the 7 most competitive races are states where Mitt Romney won by large margins, and so it should be kind of an easy takeover for Republicans. But when you go state by state, even some of the most vulnerable Democrats in red states like Louisiana and North Carolina, they're doing well. They're holding their own, and the Democrats have some marquee candidates in Michelle Nunn in Georgia and Allison Grimes in Kentucky.
Veteran TV commentator Eleanor Clift is also a contributor at thedailybeast.com.
Quote from the news, "We've been able to breathe a sigh of relief, at least for the time being." That was Ryan Larson at RBC Capital Management as the Dow closed above 17,000 for the first time since July. Existing home sales rose to a 10-month high and claims for unemployment fell.
Next, race, force, and justice in Ferguson and beyond for Warriors Only.